Today we're going to talk about pivot and unpivot inside of SQL Server. Okay, so I've got a table here. It's the product table, and it has only 3 columns. I tried to create a simple table so that we can demonstrate the concept versus dealing with all the data in the table. So this table has customer, product, and quantity, and just has 7 rows. And you can see Blue, the customer Blue purchased an orange and an apple, purchased 5 oranges and 4 apples. Schmidt purchased 3 apples. Schmidt also purchased 12 grapes, and so on and so forth. So the first thing I want to do is, for anyone who doesn't know what pivoting and unpivoting is, I want to show you an example in Excel. So I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to open Excel here. And I'm just going to paste it in. And then I'm going to create a pivot table on top of it. So this is where a lot of people understand what pivoting is from Excel. So let's insert a pivot table. And you can see on the right hand side we have the 3 columns: customer, product, quantity. And on a pivot table, I bring in customer. I can bring product across the top and quantity at the bottom, and we have a pivot table. So instead of just having all the rows that we had, now we have rows and we have product across the top. And if I remove this grand total, let's turn that off. This is basically the result that we want to get in SQL. We want to be able to pivot our product out and see the totals in there. And now an unpivot, if you had data already sitting like this, an unpivot would be taking this product and moving it back down to the rows. And again, this, since we're sitting inside of an Excel pivot table, it looks a little bit funny. Let me clean it up for us here. We don't want grand totals or subtotals. And then let's go back to my pivot table, and we want to repeat all the items. So what we want to do when we unpivot is put it back into this format. So that's what we're going to do. So let's go back over to our SQL, and let's see how we do that. So inside of SQL, there's a specific syntax. I'm going to copy that over so you can see it. Let me zoom back out a little bit. So right here is our syntax. Let me get rid of that. Get a good comment. And it looks really complicated right now, but it's not too bad to do. And once you do a couple, you can get through it pretty easy. So what we're going to do is we're going to do this same thing. Let me make some room, and we'll start typing this thing out. Okay, so the first thing the syntax says is select the column names. So I'm simply going to say select star. That's all I want. And then you say from the table name. So this is the same thing we have up there, dvo.product. Okay, and now we need the keyword of pivot. Put that in there. And then when I look at the syntax, we have 2 parentheses. And then we have an alias. And so I'll just say as X. And so that's just an alias name. So none of that matters. So far I haven't really did anything. I've just typed in some of that. Now we've got to do this aggregate function. So most of the time, what you want to do is you want to sum. Sometimes you could average or min or max, but most of the time in the pivot, you're probably going to sum up. So we're going to do a sum. What column are we summing? We're going to sum the quantity. All right, so we've got that part done. Now the last piece is, well, what column are we going to pivot on? And now what we need to do is we need to put in the pivot column. And so we say for, and we're going to pivot on product in. And now, since this is not a dynamic list, and so you actually have to define what's in the column. And so this is why I probably don't use pivot that much inside of SQL, because something like Excel will do the pivot much better. But in this case, what we want to do is we want to put orange. And depending on if you're in case sensitive mode or not, you may want to match this exactly to your list in here. And so I'll go ahead and uppercase it, orange. And also notice we do not put ticks around this like it's a string, because they're going to turn into columns. So apple, grape, and I'm picking these up from down here. So I got an orange, apple, grape, and a banana. And I can copy that up. Oops, I don't know what I just hit. Banana. Okay, so that filled out the syntax. Let's see if this pivoted for us. And it did. So now we've got the customer down the rows, but across the columns, we actually have the different types of products. So that is the pivot. There's not a whole lot more to it other than it can get a little more complex if you have more values and have to put those in there. It's used. I find every once in a while I have a use for this. I more likely will have a use for unpivoting, or if you do have to pivot something, it's maybe because you want to put like a different comment out there, like comment 1, comment 2, comment 3, or maybe you want to for some reason put your months of the year along the columns. So now we got to move into the unpivot. So on the unpivot, first of all, we need a place to practice this on. And I could use this as an alias, but it's going to, it might complicate it. So I'm just going to use a little trick. I'm going to select all this stuff I just got, and I'm going to select it into a new table, product, pivot. And so let's drop that in. And if I look on the left over here, I probably have a new table sitting around, product pivot. So now we're going to work against that. So I'm going to come up here, I'm going to query that. Okay, so now we're going to pretend we just have this pivoted table, and we need to unpivot it, and we need to get the product basically down the rows. So for that, we have another syntax. Let me go ahead and move all this stuff down, out of the way. Let me bring in the other syntax where it's very similar. I mean, it looks almost identical. The problem is this syntax I don't think is quite right. I don't think we need this aggregate function here, and let's get rid of that. Okay, so let's start this one up. Select star from dbo.product pivot. And so we start with that, which is what we have below. And then we need to use the unpivot. And when you give it an alias, we'll give it X. And now what we want to do is say what we want the value column to be called. Because in this case, we've got the pivot here, orange, apple, grape, and banana, but we have a value in there. So what do we want that to be called? And we'll have it called quantity. And then we say for, and then in this case, we say pivot column, and then we're going to define what the pivot column is. So I'm going to say in, and now we're going to type that same list. I'm going to go get it back from down here. And now it's going to reference those columns, orange, apple, grape, and banana, and it's going to pivot it. So let's take a look at that. And it did. Now, this is interesting. I should have named my pivot column, because if you look, it's called pivot column. So this is the name of what you want it to be called. So if I want it to be product, I put product there. And now it's called product. And so if we wanted to reorder these, we can change this and specify customer, product, and quantity. And now we have the same table, very similar to what we started with. So let's bring these two statements back up together. And you'll see there's not really much difference in them. The only difference is I didn't sum right there. Get rid of that select into. and I summed here on the pivot, and we have the unpivot versus the pivot. So now I want to show you one more thing. And so this is like, when would you use this in your normal operating? So if you're normally programming, when do you pivot and unpivot? I think I have an example, and we'll see what this looks like here. So I'm going to pull up the this employee details table. All right, so this employee details table, we have an employee number, which is like a primary key or identity. We have an employee name, job, manager, hire date. We have a salary, commission, department number. But then off on the right here, we have a phone 1 and we have a phone 2. When you're in your normal business, you're going to run into databases that are like this. And so we have phone 1, phone 2, and the business just said, hey, we need a phone 3. And we think at this point, we should stop storing these as columns, and we should change this to a new table. So what we want to do here is we need to come up with a query that gives us the data that should go into the new table. And so we're going to do that here. And what we need to do is pivot. So this is what we learned from, or I'm sorry, when I say pivot, we need to unpivot. So to unpivot this, select star from our table, DVO employee details, and we need to unpivot. Okay, so what do we need to unpivot? Well, we need to unpivot the phone number itself. So we'll call that just phone number 4. And when we unpivot it, what do we want these column names to be in? And I think those are like the phone number type. And so that's what I'm gonna call it. I'm gonna call it phone type, and then what's the value in it? So we have phone, and we have phone 2. So the actual number is going to be called phone number. So in this case, the 1234561 is actually what's going to be inserted into the phone number. There's going to be a new column that encompasses this one column, and it's going to be called phone type. And inside of it, you're going to have phone as one value, and you have phone 2 as another value. So now the only thing left is we need this alias. And so let's see if we unpivot this. So now we've pivoted it, and you can see, like for Smith, let's run both of these together here. Okay, so Smith had one row before, and it had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, and 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. And now there's 2 rows with 2 different phone types, phone and phone 2. And the phone is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1. And the phone number is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. Now our new table that we need to create doesn't need all these other columns because it's already stored in employee details. So we really only need a couple columns, employee number, and then we need phone type, and then we need phone number. So let's rerun this. And now we've got a little table that can be linked on phone number, and it has the type of the phone, and then it has the number that's in there. Now I don't want these blanks. And so can we put a where clause on this? Phone number is not equal to that. There we go. So now I've got my distinct list of phone numbers, and I can simply select this into a new dvo.phone, dvo.phone number, or actually employee phone number. And now we have 17 rows in there. Now let's take a look at that table. And so now we've got that table. And to clean up this final bit, we need to remove some columns from the employee details. So let's do that. Alter. See if I know the syntax or not. Employee details. Remove. I don't know if I need a column keyword or not. We're going to find out. We'll remove phone. And I'm missing keywords all over the place. Okay, I guess it's not remove, it is drop. So you can see how often I drop columns. And then we'll remove phone 2. Those are gone. Now our employee details doesn't have them. Our employee phone number does. And now we can expand that and have as many phone types as we want. And all we have to do is join these two tables together to get those details back together. We can even create the table the same way that it originally was. Let's go ahead and try that for a minute. So let's join this, and we don't want to inner join. Not everybody has a phone. We'll do a left join, dbo.employee phone number. And we'll give these some aliases. Details, phone, on d.employee number equals p.employee number. And so now we have the data back, but we have multiple rows if you have multiple phones. So now if we want to get it back to exactly what it was, we need to do a couple things. One, I'm going to specify what columns I want here. So I'm just going to grab everything from the employee details table, and I'm going to grab from the employee phone, I'm going to grab the phone type, and I'm going to grab the phone number. And the reason I'm doing this is because if you look here, employee numbers in here twice, and when we try to pivot this, we're going to have a problem with it. So let me go ahead and just specify that. And now we're going to have to treat this whole thing as our table. So if you remember our syntax, where we have, in this case, we have dbo.product, what I want to do is substitute this whole thing, this whole query right here, and treat it like a table. So we're going to say select star from, and now this is our whole table here. So I'm just going to put parentheses around it, and you need to imagine that that's the DBO product table. So that whole thing. And now we're going to go to the pivot as X. And then what do we want to pivot here? So let's rerun this section here. And we want to take and pivot the phone type and display the phone number. So in this case, we don't want to sum phone number because you really can't sum them. We'll just take the first one, the minimum of the phone number. And then we need to tell it what to pivot on. And so we're going to pivot on phone type. And we're going to put the values in there. We're going to put phone and phone 2. And we need an alias up here. I missed. And why isn't it like phone and phone 2? I guess it does like phone and phone 2. So now you can look, we've got back to our original table, but now we can store as many phones as we want. And if we ever had like a fax in there, let's go ahead and put a fax in. So let's insert into the employee phone number. And we're going to insert the employee number, phone type, phone number, and the values. And so we're going to put a new one in and see what happens. So let's put another one in for Smith. Smith, employee number's 7369. And then let's put a new phone type. In this case, the phone type is going to be a fax. And then let's put a new number in, and we'll start with 345 6789. Okay, so if we insert this, and if we go back to our original join here, we're going to now see a fax sitting in the phone type for Smith. Now, when we do the unpivot, what's going to happen? There is none. There's no fax yet. All I see is phone and phone 2. So what's wrong? Well, we need to put the defined column in here, like so. And now we've got our fax in. So we've got a more flexible phone number table. It can be joined. We can put as many in there as we want. So we don't have to keep putting columns inside the employee details table. So that's how you use the pivot, the unpivot. Hopefully this helped.